And as I introduce him, you will realize who the person is. He is a communications consultant by profession. He's a trainer, he's a coach, and he helps individuals and corporates to be better presenters in public. He's also an author, and he wrote a book with the title Impact: How to Communicate in Public. Let me repeat it. Impact: How to Communicate in Public is published in his home country, Portugal. He leads and organizes TEDx events, and especially TEDx Porto, which is Portugal. He has spoken more than 280 events. I don't know how he managed that, but he has done that. Events like TEDx, Ignite, speech competitions, creative sessions, strategic workshops, and the list continues. So I'll stop over here with a few examples. He became Distinguished Toastmaster in 2017 and Toastmaster of the Year award he achieved in 2022. Currently, he is the District 107 Program Quality Director. And just for everyone's benefit, District 107 also has 7 countries in that district, which is Portugal, Spain, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Andorra, and Gibraltar, if I have pronounced that country name as well correct. So please, as I say, take your pen or your notebook, start writing your notes as our speaker is going to speak and give us a lot of knowledge about the keynote. And with that, let me present our keynote speaker and pass the control to him, Distinguished Toastmaster Norberto. The floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank you for your kind invitation. I'm very honored to be here and to share my knowledge with you. And let me just start by saying this very important thing, which is I am here for you. I'm here for all of you. And because of that, if you would like to ask any questions, if you'd like to interrupt, feel free to do it. You don't have to raise your arm. Just switch on your microphone and ask any question at any moment. That's all fine by me. The only thing, of course, is that the question needs to be short so that I can carry on then with the keynote, with the workshop. And I'm here to share my knowledge about doing keynotes. In effect, they are a little bit like TED Talks. I'm sure you've watched TED Talks before. Well, I hope you have. These are presentations where someone comes to a stage. Most of the times it's a real stage, not actually, I mean, when I say real, is in person, but it can be online as well, as we are here. And it's a moment when the speaker or speakers will have about 18 minutes to share their knowledge, to share their experience, to share the results of some research that they've done, to share an idea, a project, something that they've done in their community or in the world with everyone. And for me, this is very similar. And I've helped hundreds of people doing their own keynotes. And I'm here to share this knowledge with you and hope it will be helpful for you. This will last about 1 hour. We'll have extra time in the end to share that information, to share actually a moment for questions. But again, feel free to simply switch on your microphone and speak. I'm here for you at your service. And I'd like to start with you just to share a short outline about this presentation. We will start by talking about what exactly is a keynote. Second, how is it different or similar to a speech at your Toastmasters Club? Third, how do you create one keynote speech, which is a little bit different from a Toastmasters speech? And then also how to make it impactful for the audience. How are you going to create an everlasting memory about that topic so that it goes into people's minds and hearts? And of course, I will have a last message for you. So let's start with this first topic. What exactly is a keynote? Well, a keynote is a speech about a particular very specific topic, and usually to a very specific audience. It could be, for example, that you are hired or requested, invited to go to a congress of people who share the same profession. It could be a medical congress, a technological congress, a congress for lawyers or accountants. And usually you are in the same kind of expertise level where they are as well, and you come to share your own experience. Or maybe it's slightly different. For example, sometimes in some congresses or some events like this, people don't really have a particular experience because they could be a very mixed, a very diverse kind of environment, such as a TEDx event or a TED event. But usually it's more like, it's very specific. It could be about one idea or about your knowledge, and it's rarely about a opinion. So that's, I'm already lifting the veil a bit about the differences between a keynote speech and a speech at your local Toastmasters club. But usually it doesn't really, again, it doesn't really go into the details of your opinions. It's actually more fact-based. And most of the times, a keynote will happen at the beginning of such an event to set the tone for the event. Usually a keynote is also like a headliner. So a keynote speech usually comes at the beginning to show everyone a particular point on a particular topic. And then everybody else will speak on a very, very specific topic. So there you are. A keynote is a speech like every other speech, but it's mostly fact-based and directed at a particular audience. That itself sets it quite apart. Now, you can have your own experience about keynotes. We all have very different experiences, and especially if we are talking about different countries, different continents. This is my experience, of course, and it can be different from yours. But again, feel free to share your experience if you need to, if you'd like to. I'm absolutely fine with that. I would love to hear if you do have different experiences. So let's start talking about how is it more different from a speech at your local club. Well, for starters, the duration. At the local clubs, most of the speeches, although there are some exceptions, will last from 5 to 7 minutes. And usually keynotes will last a little bit longer, maybe 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. I've seen keynotes for 1 hour, and that's, I wouldn't say very usual, but it does happen. And also it's more formal. Usually keynotes are formal even to the point where the speaker will be behind a lectern, a podium, and they can have their computer there, or they can have a written speech there. That can happen. Usually keynotes are formal to the point where, again, most of the times, people are not actually standing in the middle of a stage like they are in the Toastmaster speech. And because it's more focused on content, it's less focused on form. As you know, when you are in the Toastmaster speech, you are invited, incentivized to use the whole stage. Well, you don't have to do that with the keynote. You are invited to be right at the center and talk to everyone, and even to have some little bit of theatricality. So you use your arms a lot. You are, I would say, that's the right word. You are theatrical. So your form, I wouldn't say that it is more important than the content in the speech content, in the speech contents and the speeches at the local club, but usually it is. It usually is to the point when people, when they give you feedback, they give you feedback about the form, not so much about the content. Maybe the structure as well, but not the content. By the way, that's another difference. In keynotes, it's rare that you have the feedback. So it's, unless you ask for it, most people won't give you feedback like that. And if they do, they will not so much focus on the form as they will focus on the content. I would say that the best kind of feedback that you have from a keynote speech is that during the next coffee break, or whatever break you have, even lunch, people come and talk to you. And that's a great sign, a great moment to check that your speech was well received. But otherwise, there's nobody else going to that to the stage to give another speech about your speech. That doesn't happen at all in keynote speeches. The other thing is that sometimes, although it's rare, but sometimes you do use slides with your presentations, with your keynote speech. Here at Toastmasters, that's rare. I mean, maybe it will happen with people who are new at Toastmasters and they are used to use, for example, keynotes or PowerPoint slides. Here, you don't do that as much. People do that sometimes just at the beginning of Toastmasters speeches, but then they'll drop that habit. And here, I would say it's very rare, but it can happen again. And there's a big difference here, is that sometimes keynote speeches are actually paid, which doesn't happen at all with Toastmasters. I hope. I used to remember an international director when he was asked a few years ago whether he received a salary from Toastmasters for being an international director. And he very humbly said, yes, I do receive a 6-figure sum of zeros. But here at Keynotes, it can happen actually, that some people who are professionals and they are loved by the public and admired, and they will ask for a salary. They'll not the salary, but they will ask for a fee to be a speaker. As keynotes, that doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen sometimes. At least it happens a lot more than it does with actual speeches at Toastmasters. So the next point is, how do we create a keynote? How is it different from a Toastmaster speech? Well, let me start by saying this. Usually a keynote is made around one main idea. Again, not one opinion so much as such, but as an idea, as something that you're sharing with the public. So you have to start by making a list of all the main ideas, well, the main idea and all the other things that you'd like to prop up the main idea with. For example, you want to talk about astrophysics. You want to talk about a new law that is created in your country that will impact those people in the audience. Or you would like to talk about some scientific research. That information, you of course will have always one main idea, one main objective that you'd like to share with the public. But here you're going to list all the main arguments that you have, all the main information. So what evidence do you have, if you have any, and then share that with the public. Now, with keynote speeches, although you have a little bit more time than with a Toastmaster speech, it's best, of course, also to keep that good old habit of curating your topic, of making sure that you only include the most important information and not everything, because otherwise it's going to be just a list of things, like almost like a bullet point of list. You don't want that, do you? Remember, we still have to keep a narrative, and keynote speeches are really important for you to do that. Then, of course, you present your arguments, you present all the data. Just make sure that you do have that information ready at hand and that you memorize all of it. Also remember that you have to make everyone in the public to understand and feel your message. So people usually understand proverbially in their minds, they will feel it in their hearts. I've seen I remember a very interesting quote by an American poet called Maya Angelou. By the way, it's not from her, it's from somebody else, but she quotes the quote saying that in the future, the audience may not remember what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And that's really important to keep that in mind. That's very important to keep very familiar with that idea. The reason is that sometimes we focus only on content and none of it in form and passion and so on. I'll get there in a moment, but that's really important because that way you will be remembered while the presentation is happening. Of course, you'll be keeping the attention of everyone, but maybe 1 month, 6 months, 5 years on, people will remember you better if you are more than just giving information, more information, and flood them with information. We don't do that at all, right? We don't like doing that at Toastmasters, but then remember, 5 to 7 minutes isn't enough. With keynotes, you have a big responsibility because most of the times you'll have a lot longer to make your speech, but then if you flood all that, if that moment, that time, that duration with information, that could be a bit hard. Then you also have to provide lots of examples. So don't think about just the content as being, let's say the most important concepts, but remember to bring examples. Remember to bring something that will illustrate what you are talking about with the audience. And for that, you can use your own experience. You can use real life examples that they will know about, which will be making them familiar and closer to you. Of course, this will help you create an emotional connection with the public. But you can also use examples that the public knows nothing about. And that's really important because you are, in effect, sharing your knowledge. You are teaching the public about something. If you do that, people will feel smarter. And you know who they will thank for? It's going to be you. It's going to be you. You are the person there sharing this information, and everybody will be very thankful for that. So yeah, provide your own examples. It could be about your life experience, both personally and also on a corporate level or a more institutional level. That's acceptable. It could be also about organizations in general. It could be about a certain company that did something. It could be about a certain institution that have made a project, or just give an example about them. As long as people can understand and relate to, they will absolutely love it, because again, it will help them illustrate in their minds what you are talking about. And finally, something very, very important about content. Bring something new. Don't just bring old ideas. Don't bring just old quotes like I've done a while ago. Bring something that is very relevant for those people, but something that they've never heard about. So you have a mix. You have a mix of things that people know about, which then you can use to create an emotional message, an emotional connection with the public. But you also have to tell them something new. Imagine, for example, that you are in an event where the public has to pay a ticket for. Could be something like $5 just to justify that there will be some expenditure to ensure that people will come and won't give up. It could be something like $500 or $5,000, who knows? I would say that your responsibility towards the public is always the same, whether it's for free or $5 or $5,000. For me, it would be the same anyway. But always remember that your level of expertise and also of responsibility with the public is very important. That you have to ensure that you give something new for them, something that they will cherish, that they will remember in the future. A while ago, when I quoted that American poet, Maya Angelou, when I said that people will not remember you so much for your content, but more for your form and the way that you make them, you talk about with passion, for example. Well, it's not 100% correct. Some people can remember you for something that they've heard for the very first time from you. So it will be two things. One of them is the content itself, but then it will have a kind of an emotional tag attached to it. And that's how people remember. For example, if you had a teacher while you were younger, do you remember now at your age, however young you are, anything that they've said, a particular sentence? Well, you kind of paraphrase these things in the back of your mind. You kind of remember these things. But if you're asked to share with everyone, well, tell me something that teacher told you, you don't really know for sure. You will know how they made you feel. You will know a little bit of the ideas that they shared with you. You will know the subject that they were a teacher of. You will never remember just one exact sentence unless, of course, this person said that sentence over and over again. But it's important to do it anyway, because you will remember some parts, not exactly, not verbatim, word by word, but enough so that in the end you'll remember a little bit. Not totally, but a little bit, which is enough. Another important aspect is simplicity. Regardless of the public that you're talking to, even even if you are a specialist in the same area of specialization of the public, keep the message simple. Don't try to make a big wall between you and the public, which is the result of having very hard message to talk about, very difficult vocabulary, and if you speak too quickly. If you do any of these things, however much they are in sync and you are in the same level playing field, it's quite possible that that public will have a hard time listening to you. For example, here we have an interpreter. Maybe you have an interpreter as well. And if you speak too quickly, that interpreter will have a hard time keeping up with you. And then, of course, the public will also have a hard time to keep up with the interpreter, and therefore they will have a hard time to keep up with you. We don't want to do that. But even without an interpreter, if you speak too quickly, if you speak with, for example, lots of jargon, what we call TLAs or 3-letter acronyms, if you speak in a way that you have very hard vocabulary to follow, it's most likely the case that you will be creating a huge gap between you and the public and not a bridge, not a connection. And if you do that, again, it's very unlikely that people are going to come to you in the next break and to be excited to be with you. The feedback won't be so good, especially at the end if you have a feedback form. But in person, it's very unlikely that people will come to you. If you create that barrier, it means that it's going to be hard for people to understand. It's like there's a connection, a cognition level that you are in a hard level that to understand, and people will not make that effort, most probably. I've seen, for example, people who have done amazingly simple presentations, even though they were Nobel Prize winners, for example. There are people who are very well used to make presentations to a very diverse audiences. And when they are able to make their subject, a very hard subject sometimes, to be understood by the public, it will be always the case that public will feel smarter. They'll feel like, fantastic, I'm here now today and I feel smart. I feel that I've learned something. And for me, when I go and watch somebody else's speech or keynote speech in particular, for me, extra points for where I'm learning something new. We always love learning something new every day. But can we? And can we as keynote speakers enable that? That would be really fantastic. Now, there's another thing that you can do, which is to create a special structure. And there are many structures for speeches. We at Toastmasters actually are a bit basic with that because we only look at, well, if we look at the speeches that are in the pathways, most of the times they start with an introduction, then we have a development time, and then we have a closure or conclusion. That's too simple. That is exactly the case. We should always do an introduction, then we develop the idea, and then we make the conclusion. But is that enough? I would say no. And for keynote speeches, I'll have a couple of ways that we can share that I hope you like. Now, one of them is what we call the 3 Ws. And by the way, before I actually go into a little bit more detail, these 2 structures that I'm suggesting, they can be applied for most keynote speeches, but they don't necessarily have to be, you don't have to force that. That's okay. But remember that these are just top level. Both of these structures that I'm suggesting only have 3 levels, but you can have 5 levels or 10, whatever. You can go into a little bit more detail. That's okay. That's fine. I'm just showing you the top level, and then you are able to go in a little bit more detail. So let me just skip. So the first one is what, again, I called 3 Ws. And the 3 Ws are the what, so what, and what now. What, so what now? What is this all about? Well, the what is your idea, your information, your expertise, your knowledge. And so you share this with everyone right from the start. And you can use that without even giving any context. If, and the big if is this, if you already are talking about the subject that most people or everyone in the public already knows about. For example, if you are in a very specific topic of science or engineering or law or accountants and so on, if you are in a congress that is directly related to people with these professions, and if you are going to talk there about exactly the same thing, you don't really need to set up a context. People are already in the context. So you can go straight to what we call the what, which is the idea or ideas, the main information that you would like to share with them. So feel free to do that from the beginning. Of course, you have the usual pleasantries in the beginning, the protocol, thanking the whoever invited you and so on. That's normal. Then you can go to what people usually make in their conclusions. So don't make people wait until the end to give them the juice, the most important bits of your keynote. Say it right from the beginning. It's an exercise in generosity, because most of the times we think, oh, let's leave it to the end so that people will definitely be keeping attention until the end. Well, I would say that you don't really need to do that. Come on, you're already on the stage. You don't really need to be high up there on the pedestal in order to be appreciated and loved by everyone. You will be more appreciated and loved if you make them save their time and attention and just give them the information from the beginning. Again, it depends very much on the context and everything, but you can safely do this if you are in the same kind of topic that, or if you know the same level of expertise as the topic is as well, of the topic of the public. Then you have the second part, which is the so what? And you know that what Simon Sinek, the very famed coach, business coach, and TED speaker used to say, that he says, start with why. Well, you can, we'll get there in a moment, but usually the why is above what we are proposing. So first we start with why, then we go and tell them what the solution is to our problem, which is the why is the problem, and then you talk about the solution. Here, you don't start with why, you go directly to the what. But then there's something called similar, but not to be confused with the why. The so what is, okay, so if you take these ideas that I'm telling you, or these ideas are important because they will have an impact. If I'm, for example, defending a certain project or a certain way of doing things, for example, if I'm a dentist talking to a congress of people who are also dentists, and I'm sharing a new technology or a bunch of technologies. So if I'm just sharing one technology and one thing, I'll probably be one of the regular speakers. But if I'm doing a keynote, I'll be usually more broad in my approach. But if I'm talking about a certain number of new technologies, for example, then instead of telling them why they're important, I will tell them if they use those technologies, if they implement them, and they will, what kind of benefit do they derive from that? So the so what is the benefit? And the benefit happens after. If we saw this in levels, we saw the why first, then the what, but we keeping the why away for now. Then we have the what, then you have the so what, which is the benefit. Which, remember, it's a little bit different from the why. Why is this important? Well, because if you start with the why, and some people might not even relate to that to that problem, but then you, instead of that, you share the what, and then you share the so what, or the benefit of this. Then they will see the exact benefits afterwards. Thank you. I was just seeing the text here. I was thinking it was a comment. Feel free to also comment. It's absolutely fine. Or again, feel free to interrupt at any moment. Just don't even raise your arms. Just switch on your microphone and fire away your question. The last level on the three W's is the what now? This is where we do a kind of a call to action. Why, first of all? Well, because if you are just there to share your information, for the public, it can be quite passive. The public will just hear your message. And at the end, well, that's it. They'll just shrug, and maybe they've made a few notes, and it will be quite passive. So it won't be as interesting as what I'm about to suggest, which is even at the keynote speech, you can share call to action, something that you'd like the public to do or to happen in general. If you have a big idea, maybe your idea needs to be approved by someone. So call that to action. If you have a big, not just one idea, but a technique, again, for dentists, maybe it will need regulatory approval or not. I don't know. It depends on the case. Then you can have a call to action. Or maybe it's something that the public individually, or maybe in small groups, they can do. It's the same thing. You have to make a call to action. If you don't do it, people are just going to be sitting back, and sometimes they won't even notice what they can do about. Sometimes it's obvious, you don't know, but anyway, in any case, if you do a call to action, it will be more explicit to them. They will feel more involved and active. And if they feel that, they will actually do something, or at least it's more likely that they will do it rather than just sitting back in a passive way. For example, at TEDx Porto, we asked all our speakers to come up with a call to action in the end. Not forcing it, but to, first of all, to acknowledge that they can't do anything by themselves. Maybe there's a message that they would like the public not just to understand, but also to act upon. And they have to say it explicitly. It could be about anything. It could be about immigration. It could be about loving one another. It could be about one specific idea, about a science idea. But I always ask them to do it. And at the end, what sometimes happens, depending, each case is one case, each talk is a talk. They will be approached by the public, whether it's in the event itself, while it's during the event, or maybe in the days or even months afterwards. They will be contacted by people who were in the audience or who were watching the talk later on, because all the talks will be recorded and published on YouTube. So it's likely that somebody, yes? I just thought that somebody had a question, yes? I can hear it. So maybe it's someone who's got the microphone on. It's okay. Again, what is this?
Sorry for interruption. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand, then you will be asked to ask a question. Otherwise, please stay muted. Back to you.
Thank you, Khalid. Very nice of you. They're very concerned of you. Now, again, what? So what now? You can make a presentation, by the way, with this kind of structure, whether you are making a 5-minute presentation or a 50-minute presentation. Now you just have to go into a little bit more detail, and that's it. And for example, if you have more than one idea, more than one important topic, which is perfectly possible to do in a keynote, you can, for example, do the 3 Ws, not just exactly straight through linearly, but you can actually do what's a what for each one of those ideas. So if you have 3 ideas, it'll be what's a what, and then at the end, what now? This is a very interesting variation. It works quite well. Again, it depends on you and your idea, what you'd like to talk about. So don't think that the 3 Ws are very specific, that you have to keep line by line, word by word. Don't worry about that. You are in command. The second structure that I'm suggesting is called to feel, to know, and to do. And why is this? Well, here, if you are talking to the public about something that they don't really know so well, and if you are in different contexts, unlike what I suggested a while ago, you should, in my opinion, especially if you are sharing solutions or proposals, if those solutions and proposals are actually going to solve a problem, then make them feel empathy with the problem that you are going to share. Well, how does this work? Well, you make them feel close to the people who are suffering from this problem, or with the problem itself by describing what the problem is. They will understand both the problem and how people approach it, or people are suffering from the problem. And you, again, do this right from the start. You don't go straight to your solution, to your idea, to your expertise. You have to contextualize it. And the best way I know is to share the problem first. And then, only then, comes the knowing. And here at the knowing, you can actually plug in the three W's, or actually the first two, the what and the so what. So now it's the time for you to share your ideas, why they are important, or actually their benefit, the benefit of those ideas. And then at the end comes the do. So feel, know, and do. And the do is exactly like in the three W's, which is the call to action. That's not a surprise. Most presentations, if you have a call to action at the end, especially if the presentations are mostly about sharing information, and now I'm talking about in general, any presentation that you make, if the presentation is mostly about sharing information, more information, more information, you have to make sure that you have some call to action at the end. Even if the company, if you are sharing, I don't know, company performance indicators or KPIs, key performance indicators, which are usually a bit boring to share. If at the end, well, first of all, you have to create the narrative to make it more interesting. But then at the end, if you do a call to action, for example, to focus on some ideas and, or in this case, KPIs, and ask the public to get involved to improve those KPIs. And now coming back from that analogy and back into the keynote speech, if you have ideas and things that you are sharing with the public, if you ask the public to get involved and say, tell the public exactly how you would like that involvement to happen, then the public will be involved. They will feel at least involved. A smaller percentage will actually get involved, but most people will feel involved right during that moment. And that's a lot more interesting than just giving more information, more information, more information. Then people just are going to be bored and passive. Again, three W's: what, so what now, and the feeling, knowing, and doing. It's a question that you can ask yourself. What would you like your public to feel, to know, and to do? Feel it in their hearts, to know in their minds, and to do with their hands. Heart, mind, and hands. Easy to remember, right? I hope so, at least. Then you have to prepare. I would say that you have to prepare keynote speeches a lot more than we usually prepare our speeches at Toastmasters. I don't know how often you here at the audience prepare your speeches. I know that where I come from, I'm not talking about necessarily myself, but it happens. We don't prepare our Toastmaster speeches as well. Maybe we'll do one or two rehearsals, but that's it. But with the keynote, and especially about a topic that you've never spoken about, it's really important to prepare it so that your voice comes across as confident, so that you can smile at certain points in your presentation and you're not so worried about the content that you forget about everything. No, you have to keep in mind everything. Then that will be the results of your preparation. Then your public will follow you, will understand you, they will love you. Finally, and going back to the next point. And so here we're talking about how to prepare your keynote speech. There's one part that is really important and many people forget about, which is to share your information, to share your ideas with passion. That's a really, really important thing. Now, for me, passion is more like a condiment, like sauce or salt or some herb. And it's not an ingredient in itself. The ingredient is the information that you're sharing with the public. But passion is about how you season your message. If you speak passionately, you'll be able to more easily, more frequently, and almost guaranteed to get message across to the public. But if you just give information, even if you have a narrative to that information, if you don't speak passionately, you are not going to be able to get across as well to that public. Some people will be okay, will receive the message, but some other people need that kind of connection. Well, how can you do this? Well, it starts with your voice. Your voice has to have a good tonal variety. We know that from Toastmasters. You have to keep an eye contact with the public. You've seen that, for example, I'm not looking at my notes. Maybe sometimes I'm looking at the camera. So you feel like you're being seen, that I'm looking at you. If you are in an audience, before an audience, in an actual in real life event, you have to look at the public right in the eye. Funnily enough, if it's a big audience, by the way, you look at one person in the public and lots of people around that person also think that you're looking at them, which is fantastic. So looking at the public in a big audience, it's not like you are looking like at the laser-like precision to one person. You're actually looking to a bunch of people, almost like an old flashlight. You just look at the number of people. Well, you look at one person, but lots of people think they are there as well. And another way that you can act or behave while you are doing a keynote speech that people feel the passion is, of course, the way that you share your ideas, not just with the voice and the hands, the eye contact, but also with the examples that you give. If you share examples that are funny, that are insightful, that are full of feeling, instead of just giving examples that are kind of dry, that will be appreciated by the public, surely. People will laugh, people will cry, maybe, depends on the examples that you're giving. But you have to be, how can I say it? I would say that you have to be not afraid or unafraid of being that person who brings things with feeling, not just with enumerating things or not just stating those things. You have to speak in a way that people will follow you. People will love listening to your message. I say that most times we have people in the audience, regardless of the profession, that are either very analytical or very creative, a bit of both. Sometimes none of those, but I guess that's a rarity. But my point is, even if you are talking to people who are in the same level of expertise or in the same sector of knowledge, area of knowledge as you are, that doesn't mean that they left their hearts behind. You have to be that person who speaks with passion and speaks in a way that you bring people close to your topic. In the end, people will just say, yeah, this person is so interesting. They'll never say, oh, they are so passionate. They don't say that, but they will feel it. If they feel it, they'll pay more attention to your message, and they will definitely, when it comes to the moment of following you, they will definitely consider doing that. They will not all of them do it because people have their busy lives, but they'll consider doing that. So yeah, that's actually bridging the gap between my previous topic and the next one, which is how to make this more impactful. Passion. Remember, passion is a condiment, something that you add to your message. It doesn't have to be the message itself, unless, of course, your topic is passion. That's a different thing. But in that case, talk about passion passionately. Other ways to make speeches or keynote speeches more impactful. Well, I'm sure you've heard some of them, but let's recap them here. For example, one of them is to start your message, to start your speech with your own example, with, for example, a personal story. Again, it can be a personal story as your personal one that happens in a non-corporate way, let's say that is private to you, and you open up on something that happened to you. Or it could be about something that is personal to you at a corporate level. For example, an example of, say, for example, your first day at that institution, that company, or the moment that you had that eureka moment, you found something really insightful, something really interesting. Share those moments with us, because again, that will, first of all, help you with the passion, something that I just told you about, but also because when you are more perceived as human, it's like you are, which of course it's not in question, you're always human, we are human. But if we are more perceived as that, people of course will enjoy their moments a lot more than if you just give information after information after information. If you do use humor, as some people say, even at Toastmasters, I was looking up the other day to see what Toastmasters talks about when they talk about keynote speeches. And one of the things Toastmasters says, at least in some articles that I've seen at official articles at toastmasters.org, is that you can start with some humor. Well, yes, but be careful, because it depends on the kind of humor. If you make jokes, be careful, because usually, not all the time, but usually jokes are about, it's against something or someone, and they can offend. So be careful with that. One thing that hardly ever offends, I think, if any at all, is what we call self-deprecating humor. So you can make fun about yourself. That's first a way to show passion, but also self-confidence. Because in the public, they will think, oh my God, if this person is so, or is so okay with laughing about themselves, it means that they're so self-confident. It means I can believe in what they're saying. You don't have to be a clown in order to do this. You can just share an actual example of something that happened to you, a funny example, and leave it at that. Of course, it has to be related directly with the topic. Don't just say something that just happened on the way over. I mean, maybe you can break the ice, it's true, but it's ideally bring a story, bring an example that belongs to you, hopefully, not to somebody else, to you, to this in front of the public, and do it again in a passionate way. And you'll score extra points when it comes to that. So self-deprecating humor is a good solution to break the ice right from the beginning. And it's going to be, I'm sure, very much appreciated by the public. Now, there's something that you can do, which is to make your presentation, your keynote presentation, unforgettable. First of all, why is this important? Well, because most of the times we tend to forget things that we've heard in a speech, unless they're very, very impactful. As I said before, you may forget what people said. Maybe you won't forget how people made you feel. So you have to make the speech itself unforgettable so that your message will be unforgettable as well. There are some ways of doing this. I'm just going to give some examples without showing videos, but I'm just going to quickly describe some amazing things that I've seen, most of them in TED Talks. For example, I've heard one Italian man called Ernesto Ciroli. He was in a TEDx event in Christchurch in New Zealand, and he was talking about Western country aid to Africa, and not just Africa, to many countries in the world, and to say how bad some of that aid actually is because it creates corruption and so on. And he gives an example when in the 1970s, when he was young, he was in his early 20s, as an Italian man in an Italian nonprofit, went to Zambia, and he was sharing the moment where he was trying to show people in Zambia how to grow food, how to do agriculture. And he felt very much like, I'm the savior. I'm going to save these people. I'm going to teach them. I'm going to keep them away from starvation. But he says at some point, when all the crops are ready, hippos came from the river and they ate everything. And then he was horrified. My God, the hippos. And he said, why didn't you tell me? Well, you never asked. It was so funny. I mean, the way he does this in very theatrical way, it's amazing. And with that story, doing a story like that in the beginning, it's quite unforgettable to do it. He goes on. I mean, if you try and look in, I'm going to actually put here in the chat. I'm going to write his name, Ernesto Ciroli. And if you put TED or TEDx talk in front, if you Google this, you'll find a talk. It's definitely worth watching. The other thing that you can do to make yourself unforgettable is to bring something physical to the stage. Something physical means something that people in the public think they're going to be able to reach out and touch it. Why? Well, because if you do this, it adds an extra dimension to your speech. Usually speech and words, it's just talk. It's something that's non-tangible. And it's okay to be non-tangible, but if you do something tangible, if you bring, I don't know, it could be a prototype, it could be something to illustrate, it could be a Lego construction, it could be like a neurosurgeon actually once brought a piece of the brain to people, to show people, which is kind of gross, but it really kept people awake and totally paying attention. It's not the best example in some cultures, I know, but it worked for that. But it could be a lot of other things. Bring something tangible to the public. I've once seen a TEDx speaker at TEDx at my events to bring, how can I say this? To bring an analogy of what the universe is like. And he says, the universe is like, you don't see most of it because there's this thing called the dark energy and the dark matter and so on. And he talks to the public very passionately about this. But he doesn't bring an idea about, it doesn't talk about this in a way that people don't understand. For example, you could share something about equations that nobody would be able to understand. Instead, it brings analogies. It brings things from their own day-to-day lives about the things that they can touch and not touch, see and not see, and so on. And that that way people understood it. I've also once saw a speaker who was trying to show people that a certain type of medicine doesn't work. And he showed that on stage. He actually took that medicine in front of everybody. If that medicine worked, he would die during that same presentation. He didn't. He lived for many years after that. I mean, he's dead now because he was already quite old, but it was not because of those medicines. So sometimes you have to show how something is working. Be ready to demonstrate, not just speak about it. It's great to speak about it, but if you demonstrate it, it's even better. You will notice that I'm not doing that here, I know, but I'm choosing on Zoom not to distract you with videos and examples of something I'm showing you, like objects and so on, but to be speaking direct to camera, which I think is more important when it comes to Zoom. The other thing that you should do, and that's the last one, and it's a lot in common with Toastmasters, with the speeches, is this. It's actually very easy to do, which is to have zero hesitations. I'm sorry, I've already done a few of them, but you know, when we are not talking our mother tongue, when it's you feel a little bit nervous, that's sometimes that can happen. But if you prepare well enough, not only to do zero hesitations, zero verbal and non-verbal crutches, that will help the message as well. Imagine that you have a great speech, but you, as a speaker, you didn't prepare that very well, and you were hesitating a lot. Well, a lot more than I'm doing now already. I'm sorry. Then people will not be as impacted. They will not feel as impacted with the message. I'm just seeing the red flag, so I'm going to finish very quickly now. Just leaving one last message, if you allow me. Keynote speeches are amazing to proceed as a Toastmaster. There are lots of things that as a Toastmaster, you are already a specialist. It could be about communicating. It could be about leading. It could be about managing small or bigger teams, how to organize an event. Those are amazing topics to do keynote speeches. The next step that I'm suggesting, and to finish this keynote that I'm doing right now, is to go out, talk to people who maybe they will benefit from having a keynote speech about these topics or about any other topics that you know about. If you are already a specialist, introduce yourself, offer your services. You will see, experience, you will live through something that will be unforgettable for yourself. And if you make it unforgettable for the public as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this great workshop presentation, the insights you have given us about the keynotes. And as usual, there are those questions. I've taken down few questions from the audience. Some are mine. So I'll go with the audience questions first. Is it good idea to start the keynote with some humor, which you mentioned it can be, but how and controlling the humor is important. But let's hear from you once again. Is it good idea to start a keynote with some humor?
Yes, but yes, you should. I think it's a great way to break the ice. Be mindful of the people that you are facing, the different cultures, different people, men and women, young and old, and so on. And try to make humor that is not just based on jokes. Be very mindful. Also, the humor has to be positive. The best humor that I know is called the self-deprecating humor, where you share something that happened to you, you make fun of yourself, you laugh about yourself, and you allow the public to laugh about you. That is a great way to start a keynote speech, but also to do it during the speech as well, not just to start.
Okay, we have a question or rather a comment from Toastmaster Nimati. We're asking about the content to be shared. We will be sharing this video recording to everyone in the group, so it will be available to all. Now, coming back to the questions once again, the question is, you mentioned about the keynote is an idea, fact-based, not an opinion.
Yes.
So the question here is, some people take the same keynote to multiple events, is that still a keynote or that becomes a normal speech?
I think it's still a keynote. A keynote will still be something, as long as it's appreciated by the public, and as long as, again, idea or expertise that is being shared, people can repeat it. And to be honest, I don't see a lot of bad doing in that. You do have one thing to be concerned about, which is that if you have in the public people who have already watched you before doing this kind of speech, then maybe if you don't bring anything new to them, they'll be bored. Unless, of course, you are absolutely amazing. People love it, in which case they will love you even more. But you have to be very careful about this. Sometimes, especially if you are sharing your own stories, sometimes you tell stories in a slightly different way, and people may remember that in a different way. So imagine that you are now sharing a story, but then in 1 year's time, you're going to share a story slightly different because it's the way that we memorize things changes in time. Be careful, because that can happen. It can happen that people actually remember, who knows, your story, and they'll think, oh, that's a bit different from what I've heard some time ago. Maybe not in 1 year, maybe 1 week, 1 month. It's more likely that people will remember things in a slightly different way. So be careful with that. I'm suggesting, however, that you always tailor your message to the exact same public. So bring up new things. You can have the same structure, the same overall ideas, but be ready to make speeches in a different way. I'll share one thing that happened to me a few years ago. I was asked by the teachers of a secondary school in Porto to give 2 presentations back to back, so one immediately after the other, to 2 different classes of students. They were both in 11th grade. In Portugal, we still have a 12th grade, and then students go to university. But they were 11th grade pupils, 2 different classes. And I made exactly the same speech in totally different words. Why do I say it's the same speech? Because it was the same objective, the same kind of ideas, but then the examples I gave, everything was different. And you know who appreciated this the most? The teachers, because they had to be there during both classes. And they were thinking, oh, well, I've heard this already. The second part, I can just go and open my computer and start looking at my email. But then they said, Norberto, you said everything was so different. And you were talking about the same. That was great because I didn't feel bored. I could actually follow that. It's a great tip, believe me. If you do that, people really, really thank you for that, because you made them their time be appreciated. You were generous with your ideas.
I will use that idea for sure. So sometimes we don't get a lot of content, but we can twist how we can present it, but still we're talking the same thing. Now we have 3 hands raised, so I'll go with them before the other questions. So as I see in the order, DTM Mohammed Ukardin can go with the short question.
Thank you so much, District 20 PQD and District 107 PQD. Thank you for inspiration and motivation about the keynote. I will try my level best and do keynote speech. Now, just I have a question, how we can identify it's a natural keynote speak or it's a prepared keynote speech? As I have seen, Steve Jobs from Apple, he has delivered his keynote speech, and he mentions like a ice break, and he has explained about his how he's grown up and very easy. So is this related to keynote speech? And as you mentioned about W and W, can you explain, please?
Yeah, in my opinion, yes. I mean, these things, is ice breaks and everything you can do to make sure that your public will understand the message, and first of all, to even pay attention to the message, is very useful. The keynote speech is not just about delivering content. It's mostly that. But if you do only that, then the public, well, some public will love it anyway, but some people will be not as interested. I usually say that in the beginning, you grab people's attention so that on the second part, let's say, you help them understand the message and then help them act. And this attention, understanding, and action, feeling, knowing, and doing, right? And in my opinion, you should always do that, always. Now, do you have to do that all the time? No, I don't believe in, let's say, these advice that applies to everything. If you are already experienced, if you feel experienced, then you are allowed to do anything you want if you are conscious. For example, I'll tell you an example. A few years ago, 7 years ago, we changed the name of our TEDx Oporto event. It used to be called TEDx Oporto with an O, Oporto, which is the English spelling of the city. And we changed it to TEDx Porto. And I just delivered this from the stage during the actual event. I told them, I have a surprise for you. And one of the things that we always say at Toastmasters is never turn your back to the public. And I did exactly that in full conscious. The stage was big, very deep. So I was right at the front, at the edge of the stage, facing more than 1,000 people. And I told them, as I said, I have news for you. I turned my back to them. I walked to the back of the stage to where the letters TEDx Oporto were. I brought out the O. I joined TEDx and Porto together. Of course, now the P is in lowercase, but who cares? I brought out the O with me to the main stage, to the place right now I'm facing the public, and I'm actually jumping 2 feet over the O, destroying the O. And I got a standing ovation. So yeah, you can actually break any kind of rules if you know what you're doing. And the same thing here. My suggestion is yes, use all the advice you can from Steve Jobs. He's amazing. He's done amazing keynotes. He prepared them really heavily. He was locked in his office for 2-3 days straight. You didn't hear from anyone else except to prepare for that keynote. And he did them amazingly well. This is one of the best examples that we have. But do you have to do this all the time? No, it's now up to you. I hope I was able to answer to your satisfaction.
Thank you so much, PQD 107. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, before I go to a question from Toastmaster Miral, 2 things I want to say. First of all, everyone please turn on your cameras so that our event chair can take some good photograph, which can be posted in the group. And I just want to add also, I met the advisor or the mentor of Steve Jobs while in a conference in Dubai, and he has delivered a keynote speech. I still remember word by word what he delivered. So that sort of mentor, if Steve Jobs had and he prepared, definitely, it makes a lot of impact. Now let's go to Toastmaster Miral. Please ask your question.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for a beautiful workshop. It was really insightful. And thank you, DTM Khalid, for bringing such interesting educational material to our district.
Thank you, sir.
My question, actually, I have a couple of questions. One, a clarification. You mentioned about slides, and I wasn't sure if you're recommending using slides or not recommending. I got a bit confused in that part. So that's the first question. And my second question, should I say it now or after you finish that?
Yeah, you can. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, my second question is, how do you get from invited for speeches to paid engagement, basically? Because I get invited into giving some speeches. I never asked for money, I have to say. So I think my word, how do you get to your, because I know if you get to the first engagement, paid engagement, probably everything else will flow. So I want to hear your advice about that. Thank you.
Okay, maybe we can start with that. It's hard. It's very hard to get paid for keynote speeches, but it can happen. I remember a few years ago, I think it was about 10 years ago, I was in a team in my company, which I've left not long after that, but I was working in a company for a big company. And the boss was trying to know us all, I mean, the manager of the manager, the director, let's say, of that area. And he was asking us, so what's your dream? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? The usual question. And I told him, I want to be a paid speaker. And the guy looked at me, and he had more than 30 years experience at that company. He said, you know what? Congratulations. Go for that. If you ever get there, tell me, because I've been here for so long, I've never been paid. Well, not for this kind of speech. And he says, well, usually people invite me and they never offer, but then I don't ask, just like you say, Miral. So ask. One of the things is, people have to understand, especially if they are in very expensive events and people have to pay huge tickets, a huge price, a huge amount for tickets, that, you don't have to be paid a lot, but at least some appreciation for your work, because you have to spend time preparing that. And it's something that you're giving value to them. Maybe they should give some of that value to you as well. most of the times in the beginning, we are very self-aware and we don't think we should give them, should ask for any money. That's a decision. But if you don't ask for the money, they will keep talking to other people, other conference organizers. And if they ever ask, oh, do you know any keynote speaker? Yeah, I know one person, Miral, she's great. And she never asked for any money. Oh, great, let me talk to her. Can you give me her contact? Of course. And that's how, people talk to each other. They know. At the same time, if you ask, you don't have to ask for a lot of money, enough for them to understand some value, to give you some value in their heads, in their minds. And then you'll also have some extra money for, I don't know, for a little pleasure for you, do some shopping, or to go and have dinner with your family, whatever. The point is, you have to ask. You have to start by asking. If you don't, there's no second step. Now, going back to the first question that you asked about slides, I'm not really, per se, I'm not actually suggesting you should or should not use slides. I'm saying that some people use them, some other don't use them at all. I've seen both cases. My suggestion in some cases is that when you have something that you need to share in a way that just normal speaking, words isn't enough, like you have an image that you would like people to see or a video, use slides. You can use slides to share that. But hey, there's a big difference here. Most of the times, we start the presentation with the first slide, and then we move slides to the next one. We move slides, we talk about the next slide, and so on. And it's frankly a little bit boring and predictable. And then we finish the last message, the last slide will be thank you, and your contact details. Okay, that's great, but it's still boring. My point is, you can have slides in the middle of the presentation and not have slides during the whole of the presentation. As a whole, I mean. So you can have slides just for some moments when you want to illustrate a point that you'd like to make. Can you see this happening? Okay. You can, for example.
Thank you so much.
Great. I was just going to add one more thing, which is this, about slides. Yes. You can talk, if you are talking to an event where they have a professional team of audio and video, you can say, for example, that you have slides where sometimes the screen is blank. When I say blank, it's actually black, or when I say blank, it's nothing at all in there. So they'll appear as black. And if they know about that, ask them if they have that possibility of saying, when that happens, when I move the slides to a black slide, then replace the image in the screen with my own image. So if they aim a camera at you and then project that onto the screen, if it's a big event, that's good. And then you don't have to, it doesn't have to be always the slides. Imagine it's a big event, say 1,000, 2,000 people are in the back, they have trouble maybe looking at you because they're far. But this way you're giving them the opportunity to see you better. And again, you can play with this and the slides together.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Toastmaster Miral, one of the reasons how I got into Toastmaster is because of my mentor who's also here with us, DTM Nagendra Sitaram. You can see him on the camera. Before I joined Toastmaster, I didn't know that he was a Toastmaster at that time. Of course, he is still a Toastmaster. I was talking to him casually that what we'll do when we get retired. And I gave him a suggestion that let's start doing Keynote so that when we retire, at least we have a source of being busy and maybe can get some sort of income at times. If no income, at least somebody sponsor our ticket or our dinner for that particular event. And then he saw that interest in me and he pulled me to Toastmaster. So please ask whatever you can get paid opportunities, don't lose them. That's number one. Number two, if you join us for the next Saturday event, which will be about the accredited speaker, the keynote is an entry point to the accredited speaker for your information. And there they ask, actually, you should go and you should claim for paid events where you're paid or your event is paid somehow, so that there's some sort of compensation given to you. That's a requirement from Toastmaster International for that particular program certification. So since I don't see any hand raised, there are a few more questions I'll go and ask.
Thank you so much.
So the question is, what is the recommended length for a keynote? You did mention about the time, so just for everyone's benefit once again.
I think that the keynote is a good keynote if you stay between 15 minutes to 45 minutes, even 1 hour. It depends a lot on lots of other factors. For example, it depends on the agenda of that event. And that is most important, is to fit in and to be nice to the people who invited you. So if they ask you to talk to 1 hour for 1 hour, talk for about 50 minutes, 55 minutes, don't go overboard. I know that I've gone a little bit over the time for what, 1 minute. Sorry, guys. But the point is, try as much as possible to follow what you've asked. I would say that between a quarter of an hour and 45 minutes is more than enough to give most of the information that you'd like to give. But again, each case is one case. I would also say that over 1 hour is a lot. Then it becomes a regular presentation where it's almost like a class at university or something. And it's not a keynote anymore, in my opinion. But again, each case is one case. And there's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of variety out there in the world of presentations that we can still call a keynote. And by the way, to finish, Steve Jobs was never on stage for more than 10 minutes. It was enough. When he was doing the keynotes for iPhones and iPads and iPods, he would talk for 10 minutes, but then he would bring other people to talk about other subjects. He would talk about the concept in general. He would have someone else talk about the design. He would have somebody else to talk about the commercial aspect, somebody else to talk about the engineering aspect. So he didn't have to do everything by himself because he understood the importance of keeping it short and sweet. But again, at regular, let's say regular moments, we're not all like Steve Jobs, I'm sure. And at regular congresses and events and so on, usually 15 to 45 minutes it's a sweet spot.
Thank you. You talked about Steve Jobs and how he broke the whole thing. Basically, he used to work based on a team collaboration perspective. So that's how he used to come up on this stage. And talking about the team, we have one of our team member, DTM Osama Jibri. He has a question as well. So DTM Osama.
Thank you very much for this. Thank you for allowing me to ask. I have a small question. In fact, it's really important in any keynote or any speeches is to, as you said correctly, to give your personal experience, to tell a story about yourself. But in many cases, I found myself that I don't have a personal stories. So I used others' personal stories. Is this okay? Because I noticed some people, they know these stories and did not affect them. But I don't have my personal story.
It's a great question, Osama. First of all, let me question that. You are a story. You yourself, everybody here, we are stories. We are a succession of lots of events that have meaning. Otherwise, how can we live without meaning? That's a story. The question, I think what you're trying to say is that you can't identify them, which is a different thing. I would suggest you go back to think about your youth, to about a moment of when everything changed, to bring out the relevant moments in your life. Make a list of them. I have a list. I have in my mobile phone, have one app where sometimes when something happens to me, I write it there and I think, where can I use this? How can I use this in a keynote or in a regular training session? For example, I give lots of training sessions. And if you identify those, and also what's the hook? Let's say how you can connect to your message, you've got it. But you have to do that effort first. The second thing is about the stories is you can use the stories. You should use the stories ideally by yourself. If you use them by somebody else, make sure that people know that you're talking about somebody else, that you're not trying to appropriate those stories, especially if they are known. Because if you use them from other people without telling everyone, there's the risk, of course, that people will, your credibility before these people is going to go down. It doesn't work quite well. For example, I tell a story about one time when my mother went to school in a different way, and it's not mine, but I tell it's my mother. And it's okay, because it's something that they've never heard. They don't know my mother. And second, that the story is relevant for them. And third, I identify clearly, it's my mother, it's not me. That's perfectly fine. As long as you follow these rules, you can do that. Yes.